The protagonist steps out of their car and looks up at the house, feeling a sense of excitement rush through them. It's been years since they last saw most of their extended family, and today, a special family reunion has been planned. The kind of event that promises joy, warmth, and shared memories. The air is filled with the sound of laughter, children running around, and the delicious smells of food being prepared for a grand feast. It's the kind of day that could mend old wounds and rekindle lost connections. The protagonist can't help but smile, taking in the comforting, nostalgic atmosphere. They walk through the front door, greeted by hugs and greetings from cousins, aunts, uncles, and distant relatives. The smiles and laughter seem genuine, the chatter of good memories and new beginnings filling the air. Despite the warmth of the reunion, there's a quiet hum of underlying tension that the protagonist can't ignore. Something feels just slightly off, though they can't put their finger on it. They brush the feeling aside, focusing instead on enjoying the time with their family, trying to push away the nagging sensation that everything might not be as perfect as it seems. Among the crowd, there is one person who stands out, their brother-in-law. He's an enigma to the protagonist, someone who's always been a little distant, a little too eager to stay on the sidelines of family events. While others have seemed to grow closer over the years, the relationship between the protagonist and their brother-in-law has remained strained, superficial at best. The protagonist is financially successful, having built a career that has afforded them a comfortable life, but they never flaunt their wealth or bring it up. They try to avoid the subject of money at family gatherings, knowing it might make some uncomfortable. Their brother-in-law, on the other hand, has always been outspoken about his financial struggles. He has no qualms about discussing the difficulties of his business or how hard it is to make ends meet. The protagonist, who has always been more reserved about personal matters, wonders if their brother-in-law's continuous remarks about his troubles are a sign of jealousy. Today, however, his behavior seems more exaggerated, more noticeable. The comments feel sharper, more desperate, as if he's trying to make an impression. A brief moment catches the protagonist off guard when the brother-in-law looks directly at them, his eyes a little too focused, his smile a little too forced. There is an unmistakable undercurrent of tension, something hidden just beneath the surface. The protagonist doesn't want to believe it, thinking it's all in their head. After all, it's a family reunion, and the last thing they want is to disrupt the happiness of the occasion. They push the feeling aside once again, thinking they are simply overanalyzing things. But deep down, a small voice tells them that something is off, something is about to unfold. The dinner table is set with an array of delicious dishes, home-cooked meals, rich in flavor and memories. Laughter fills the air as relatives chat over their plates, enjoying the warmth of the evening. The clinking of glasses, the soft murmur of conversation, and the sound of children playing in the background create the illusion of a perfect family gathering. Everyone seems to be in high spirits, but beneath the surface, an unsettling tension is slowly building. As the meal progresses, the conversation turns toward family updates. The protagonist listens as cousins talk about their jobs, travels, and personal lives. But then, the brother-in-law takes the floor. His voice is loud, almost a bit too eager. He begins detailing the struggles of his business, how things have been tough, how sales have dropped, and how he just can't seem to catch a break. It's the same story he's told time and time again, but tonight, there's an urgency in his tone, as if he's trying to prove something. He leans forward, speaking with a forced enthusiasm, trying to keep the conversation centered on his financial hardships. "I just don't know how much longer I can keep this up," he says, taking a long sip from his glass. His eyes briefly flicker toward the protagonist, who tries to maintain their composure, pretending to be absorbed in the conversation. But as the brother-in-law continues, the protagonist can't help but feel a growing sense of discomfort. There's an edge to his voice that wasn't there before. His words, though masked in humor, seem to carry a weight of bitterness. The protagonist can't ignore the subtle hints dropping throughout the meal. The brother-in-law keeps mentioning how lucky the protagonist is, how everything always seems to work out in their favor. There are casual remarks about the protagonist's success, seemingly innocent but laced with a hint of resentment. "You always seem to have it all figured out, don't you?" he chuckles, his eyes narrowing slightly. The words are so carefully masked under a veil of laughter, but the protagonist feels the sting of the underlying meaning. The protagonist begins to notice more than just the words. They catch a glimpse of the lavish gifts that the family has given the brother-in-law. Expensive toys for his children, designer clothes, jewelry, things that the protagonist didn't even know they could afford. The realization hits slowly, like a wave pulling back from the shore before crashing down. There's something going on here, something more than just a difficult business venture. As the evening wears on, the protagonist's unease grows. They start to feel a creeping sense of guilt, perhaps they've been too focused on their own life and missed something. Maybe their success has cast a shadow over others, maybe it's created a rift that they hadn't noticed before. The brother-in-law continues to dominate the conversation, his tone increasingly strained as he discusses his supposed financial difficulties. The protagonist tries to brush it off, telling themselves it's just family drama, nothing to worry about. But deep down, a knot forms in their stomach. There's something about his behavior tonight that feels calculated. His remarks, his over-the-top eagerness to speak about his struggles, it all feels too orchestrated. As dinner finally comes to a close, the protagonist tries to shake off the feeling of unease. Everyone says their goodbyes, and the reunion ends on a seemingly pleasant note. But the protagonist can't shake the feeling that something is about to go terribly wrong. The last smile exchanged with the brother-in-law is just a little too forced, a little too tight, and the protagonist wonders if this reunion will be the beginning of a much darker chapter. After the family reunion, the protagonist returns home, their minds still tangled in the conversations and subtle exchanges from the evening. The warmth of the family gathering feels like a distant memory, replaced by a nagging sense of unease that refuses to let go. They go through their usual routine, settling into the quiet of their home, removing their coat, and checking their phone messages. Yet, something lingers, an odd feeling that something is off. Out of habit, the protagonist checks their bank account. It's a simple routine, a quick glance to see if any bills have come through or if everything is as expected. But tonight, as they swipe through their app, something catches their eye. A large withdrawal. Their eyes scan the numbers, but the amount is too significant to ignore. It's not just a few dollars, this is a sum that leaves them frozen, staring at the screen in disbelief. A significant portion of their savings has been drained, money they worked so hard to earn, now gone. Their heart starts racing, and the blood drains from their face as panic begins to set in. With trembling hands, the protagonist digs deeper, checking the list of recent transactions. The details are hazy, each one labeled with unfamiliar, cryptic references. The transactions have all been made within the past few hours, just after the family reunion. The realization hits them like a ton of bricks, this was no accident. This wasn't a simple mistake or a forgotten bill. Someone had accessed their account. Someone they knew. Someone they trusted. The protagonist's mind begins to race. Who could have done this? They immediately think of the brother-in-law, who had been acting strangely throughout the night. The pieces start to fall into place, his sudden eagerness to talk about money, his comments about financial struggles, and the odd way he kept glancing toward them. It's clear now that the theft was planned, executed in the shadows while everyone was distracted by the reunion. As panic threatens to overwhelm them, the protagonist takes a deep breath and forces themselves to remain calm. They quickly pick up the phone and dial the bank's customer service line. After a few moments of waiting, a voice finally answers. The protagonist explains the situation, their voice shaking but determined. They're transferred to a fraud department representative who confirms what they feared, the money was transferred to an account that is difficult to trace. The funds are gone, and the possibility of recovering them is slim. The representative reassures them that an investigation will be launched, but the protagonist knows the truth, this might be their biggest battle yet. The protagonist's heart is still racing as they march toward the brother-in-law's house, the anger and confusion bubbling up with every step. Their mind is a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, shock, and a burning need for answers. This confrontation is inevitable. The money is gone, and they know who took it. It's time to face the person who has shattered their trust, the person they once considered family. As the door swings open, the brother-in-law greets them with his usual smile, though there's a tension in the air that neither can ignore. The protagonist steps inside, their presence making the atmosphere heavier. They ask to speak privately, and the brother-in-law, sensing the seriousness in their tone, nods and leads them to a quiet room. The conversation starts off in an almost civil manner, but it doesn't take long for the protagonist to cut to the chase. They ask him directly, their voice steady, though their pulse is racing. "Did you take the money from my account?" They've been through so much in the past hours, but the confrontation is what truly begins to solidify the betrayal. At first, the brother-in-law feigns ignorance. His expression shifts into one of confusion, as if the idea never crossed his mind. "What are you talking about?" he asks, his tone innocent but slightly defensive. "Why would I do that?" The protagonist watches him closely, but they can already tell he's lying. It's in the way he avoids their gaze, how his shoulders are a little too stiff, how his breath seems to catch in his throat. But the moment doesn't last. The brother-in-law's act crumbles, and in a sudden, dismissive snort, he casually admits, "We needed it more than you." The words hang in the air like a slap to the face. The revelation is nothing short of shocking. The betrayal stings deeper than the protagonist ever imagined. They feel a wave of disgust rise in their chest, choking the words they want to say. This was never about a financial emergency or a moment of desperation. This was a calculated, deliberate act of selfishness, a betrayal wrapped in the guise of need. The protagonist is shaking now, their hands balled into fists. This is not how they imagined this conversation going. The brother-in-law's nonchalance only makes the situation worse. "You always had money," he adds, with a casual shrug. "You've never really needed it, right? My family's struggling. We had to take what we could." His voice is cold, matter-of-fact, as if it's all perfectly justified. Every word the brother-in-law says fuels the fire burning inside the protagonist. The betrayal, the disrespect, it's all too much to handle. The protagonist's anger is no longer just an emotion, it's a tangible force, pushing them to the edge of control. With trembling hands, they reach for their bag, pulling it open to reveal the consequences of this moment. "You're right," the protagonist says through gritted teeth, their voice trembling with fury, "You needed it more than me." They pause for a moment, letting the words hang in the air before adding with a chilling calmness, "Then you won't mind what's coming next." The brother-in-law's smug expression falters for the briefest second, but he quickly masks it with a forced laugh. He doesn't understand what's about to happen. The protagonist stands tall now, their resolve firm. This is no longer about money, it's about reclaiming control, about standing up for themselves in the face of betrayal. As the tension builds, the protagonist is ready to take the next step, and the brother-in-law's complacency will be his downfall. The protagonist stands there, hands shaking but mind sharp. They could act out of pure anger, throw caution to the wind, and storm off in a whirlwind of emotion. But that wouldn't be the smart move. Instead, they take a deep breath, maintaining a controlled exterior despite the storm brewing inside. The betrayal still stings, but it also sparks something else, a cold, calculating determination. They have leverage, something powerful enough to ensure this betrayal won't go unanswered. As they stand in front of the brother-in-law, their mind races, replaying moments from the past. They think back to the countless times their brother-in-law had subtly manipulated them, used them for financial gain. It was always a small request, a loan, a favor, a suggestion that the protagonist could easily help out with. But now, in hindsight, they realize it was all part of a bigger plan. The brother-in-law had been slowly wearing down their defenses, taking advantage of their kindness, all the while eyeing what the protagonist had. The money. The status. The things he wanted but couldn't have. A series of flashbacks fills the protagonist's mind. One memory stands out, the time when the brother-in-law convinced them to invest in his failing business, promising high returns. The protagonist had been too trusting, too eager to help. Now, that same brother-in-law was claiming he needed it more than they did, with no remorse. The protagonist clenches their fists, a sense of betrayal rising once again. But it's no longer a feeling of helplessness. Instead, it's a fuel that will drive their next steps. They decide to take the high road, but with a twist. Instead of letting the brother-in-law off easy, they'll use the law and their financial acumen. The protagonist is in a position of power, and they will leverage that power to ensure their brother-in-law and his family learn the consequences of their actions. No more being the victim. It's time to turn the tables, and make sure they regret ever crossing this line. As the brother-in-law continues to laugh dismissively, the protagonist stands frozen, eyes fixed on him. Every word of that smug, self-assured laughter fuels the fire inside. The anger that had simmered for so long finally finds its outlet, but the protagonist remains composed. They take a slow, deliberate breath and, without another word, pick up their phone. The room seems to freeze as the protagonist presses a button, initiating the first step of their carefully planned payback. They dial the number, their voice steady, calm. With a few words, they send a message to the right person, setting in motion an irreversible chain of events. It's a legal action, something the brother-in-law won't see coming, a blow to his finances or business that will unravel his arrogance in an instant. As the protagonist hangs up, a brief silence falls over the room, the calm before the storm. The family still doesn't suspect a thing, too focused on mocking the protagonist's threats. But that's about to change. Suddenly, there's a loud, sharp bang that shakes the house, like the sound of a distant explosion. The family's laughter falters, a momentary tension creeping into the room. Before anyone can react, the door swings open with a force that rattles the walls. It's not the usual knock or greeting. The loud bang reverberates through the house, creating an instant, uneasy silence. The protagonist's move has gone into action. A legal notice has been served, a financial blow delivered, or perhaps another dramatic consequence. The exact nature doesn't matter, but its impact is undeniable. The brother-in-law's smug smile immediately fades. His face pales as the gravity of the situation starts to dawn on him. His confidence, once so unshakable, crumbles in front of everyone. The room, once filled with laughter, is now thick with tension. The family watches in stunned silence. They had underestimated the protagonist. They had thought their threat was just words, empty air meant to appease the situation. But the protagonist is no longer the quiet, passive family member they once were. They've become a force to be reckoned with. The brother-in-law stumbles for words, but they catch in his throat. His mind races, trying to grasp the scale of what just happened. He hadn't expected the protagonist to act so decisively, to take control of the situation with such precision. But now, the entire family can feel the shift in power. The tables have turned. The protagonist has claimed their victory, and the brother-in-law has no idea what's coming next. The aftermath of the protagonist's revenge is swift and undeniable. Within hours, the brother-in-law's life begins to unravel. The legal consequences set in motion earlier start to take hold, threatening his business and financial security. The once untouchable man, who had taken advantage of the protagonist's success, is now forced to confront the damage he's caused. His smug confidence is replaced by anxiety, and the cracks in his carefully constructed life become apparent. As the protagonist watches from a distance, they can't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. The scales of justice seem to be balancing themselves. But it's not just the brother-in-law who suffers. Slowly, the family begins to see the full extent of his betrayal. The realization hits hard, and cracks start to appear in their once solid perceptions. Some family members express sympathy for the brother-in-law, empathizing with his struggles. They see him as a victim of the protagonist's ruthless actions. But others, including those closest to the protagonist, quietly support them, acknowledging that the brother-in-law's behavior had gone too far. They silently agree that the protagonist had every right to reclaim what was stolen and make the family realize the cost of betrayal. For the protagonist, however, there's a bitter tinge to the victory. Despite the justice served, they feel the weight of their actions. It's not a pure victory, there's a sense of loss that lingers. The family dynamic has been permanently altered. They've reclaimed their power, but at the cost of the relationships that once held them together. No matter how justified their actions were, the protagonist knows that things will never be the same. The ultimate consequence of the protagonist's calculated revenge arrives with full force. The brother-in-law, once a figure of arrogance and entitlement, loses everything. His business, once thriving, crumbles under the weight of legal action and financial ruin. The family watches in stunned silence as he loses his standing not only in the business world but within the family itself. The respect he once commanded dissolves, replaced by shame and regret. The protagonist has, without a doubt, reclaimed control of their life. The power dynamic has shifted, and the brother-in-law is left powerless, a shell of his former self. Yet, as the protagonist reflects on the path they've taken, the victory feels bittersweet. They question if the revenge truly served them justice. Was it worth the cost? While they've righted the wrong done to them, they can't shake the feeling of emptiness that follows. They've taken back what was stolen from them, but in doing so, they've also lost the family connections that once brought them comfort. Relationships have been fractured, and trust is broken beyond repair. The protagonist may have reclaimed their dignity, but at the cost of deeper emotional scars. The story concludes with the protagonist standing tall, having achieved their goal. They've proven their strength and resilience. The final moment is one of empowerment, both financial and emotional. They've stood up for themselves, forcing their family to see the truth and finally taking control of their own fate. However, karma has a way of balancing things. The family is now divided. Some still sympathize with the brother-in-law, while others silently applaud the protagonist's actions. The protagonist, though, walks away with a sense of finality. They did what was necessary, and in the end, they stand victorious. The brother-in-law, once so smug and confident, is left with nothing but regret, knowing that the price of betrayal was far greater than he ever anticipated.